Hi, and welcome to the locker room. I am one of your hosts, Justin Ham, and thank you so much for joining us as we journey through tough issues that guys face as athletes, but also as humans. Let's welcome our guest today, Dylan, as he is here today to help us navigate the questions of guys, God, and does it matter? Dylan, thank you so much for joining us. Tell us a little bit about how you and I first got connected.
Yeah, so I think we first met Justin at 360 and
Hmm,
in 20 was it 24? I think we first met. Like I think you were
I
there
think
2 years
so.
ago. I think we
Yep.
didn't meet each other, but we were both there. Then the next year, same
Yep.
thing. Then um you guys had the power camp up in New York. What area was that? Like,
So we were in the capital region of New York, just outside of Albany, about 20 minutes outside of Albany.
yeah. So Gavin hit me up and said, "Hey, they're looking for some help for the baseball team." So I was like, "Yeah, sure, I'll do it." And so I saw he sent me your number, and I didn't even connect the pieces at all. I was like, "Okay, Justin, I'm gonna go meet him." And then I finally saw you. I was like, "Wait, I know Justin. He's been at 360." So then
That's right.
got connected, had some fellowship together, and just good time.
Yeah, man. Yeah, so for listeners who might not know, so I FCA capital region lives in Albany. Dylan's actually from out of state. So Dylan, you're from Massachusetts. So tell us, let's take it back to the very, very beginning or as far back as you want to go. Tell us a little bit about your life and kind of growing up and we had you for baseball, so I have a feeling you're going to unpack that baseball is a passion of yours, but just kind of walk us through it from the beginning.
Yeah, I mean, so I guess if we really want to start, um, I was born and raised in Lunenburg, Mass. I still live in the same house I grew up in. Um,
Mhm.
live both my parents. I have an older brother who's 23. I'm 21, and then I have my younger sister who's 12, I believe. I think she's
It's okay. She's roughly
11 or
roughly
12.
she's
She's
you're
11 or
younger than
12.
you.
I know
She's
she's
younger
not.
than you. That's all you
Yes,
need to know.
yes. So yeah, I grew up in Lunenburg. My parents, honestly are my biggest inspirations in my life. I look to them up to them so much,
Mhm.
especially with my walk with Christ. They were always guiding me and great examples, I say, especially as a man, I look to my dad a lot for how he raised me, and that's kind of who I just wanted to be and strive to be.
Mhm.
So I grew up playing baseball. I think I started when I was 7. I never wanted to play when I was a kid, and then I saw my brother, he was playing, and I was like, "Yo, I'm gonna be better than him. I'm gonna play just to be better than him." And so I started playing, and then I played baseball from since I was 7 all the way till 20, one of my sophomore year in college. Um,
Mhm.
but yeah, growing up, I was a Christian. I fully believe I gave my life to the Lord when I was, I think, 7 or 8 too. And then as
Mhm.
I grew up, I kind of wore that as the Christian title. I was known as the Christian kid around school. I think whenever
Sure.
everyone looked at me, because especially with my friends, I was a goody two shoes kid, didn't do anything. Um, and then I got to high school, and freshman year was really, I think a lot of people like it was either when COVID happened, it was either great for them or bad for them. And when COVID hit for me, it was terrible. Um, I think
Mhm.
when that hit, I really started to struggle in my walk, and I
Yeah.
really just being a Christian really just became a title for me there. I became super lukewarm
Sure.
and going honestly all the way through high school. Um, it was just like I said, this title for me as a Christian kid, everyone knew me as that, but behind the scenes, I was just living for myself, living for the world. And so continuing, I'd say, so throughout high school, I played baseball, and I didn't have a freshman year because COVID, but
COVID. Yeah.
played varsity sophomore through senior year. I played football in high school from I started in fifth grade for football, and then I played all the way till senior year. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, to go a little more into my testimony, I believe a junior, and this was a big like switching point in my faith here. I was a junior, and I was at this party and drinking and smoking, like those were never my things. I never, I was just never
Sure.
enticed by either of them. But I had friends, like all my buddies pretty much would drink and go out. So we were at this party one time, and I was just sitting back. I'd always just people watch, one of my favorite things to do. I was sitting back, but I was judging all of them like crazy. I was like, how can all of them say they're Christians and they're drinking like this? And I can't believe that. Like, how can you guys do that? You guys are such hypocrites. I'm telling you, I was sitting back on this chair. I'll never forget it. I was sitting on this chair and I felt like almost an audible voice of God saying, like to me, says to me, "You are the biggest hypocrite I know." And
Wow.
that like knife to the chest because
Sure.
I proclaimed to be this Christian kid, and I played it out on the outside, but behind the scenes I was probably worse than them with all my sins, and I
Hmm.
just continued to just judge them. And that moment was honestly like a life shifting moment for me, and I started taking my faith more seriously. I was like, I gotta lock in with God. I can't just be a lukewarm Christian. And then so
Yeah.
getting plugged back in with stuff, and then my freshman year of high school, I got plugged back into FCA. I started doing,
Whoop, whoop.
yeah, I really, my first year of 360, it was the summer of my freshman year of college. I didn't want to go, but I didn't even know about it until like the end of, I think it was 2 weeks like before the camp started, and Dan Barnes texted me and said, "Hey, do you want to help out? You want to volunteer?" And I was like, "No, I don't really want to." Like, I don't really want to. And at this point, like, I was locked back in with God, but I felt like something was missing in my walk. And so
Sure.
I was I was like, I don't really want to. Like, it's 2 weeks away. Like, that's not enough notice. Not that I had anything going on, but I was like, no, I don't. That's not enough of notice. And then
Yeah.
I was like, I felt God really telling me to go. So I was like, I'll go. So I ended up going, and 360 for me was a life-changing, a life-changing moment.
Yeah.
I took so much out of it, and that moment was, I remember on my drive home from 360, I was in the car, and I felt like my question of what I was missing was answered, and that was
Mm.
service, was serving. And that was the big thing I think I was missing in my walk, because after that I started serving and I felt really empowered in my walk with Christ. And yeah,
Yeah, man.
that leads me to today pretty much. I've just been
That's
continuing
awesome.
serving, and yeah,
Yeah.
it's awesome.
Awesome. Well, there's a lot there we can unpack and maybe we can jump
Yeah,
into some of that, but
I
I
went on.
did um no, dude, no, I love that. That's brutal honesty, man, and that's one of my favorite things. So, we're gonna touch on that, but for people who aren't sure, so 360 is it's a regional camp for all of the Northeast region of the United States. It's for high school freshmen up through recent graduates of high school, so 9 through 12, or if you just graduated. And it's any sport, any athlete. It's really not even about the sport. It's about getting athletes together, helping them learn how to train, and then showing them that there's more to life than just their sport. And it's a weekend camp, and it's at Gordon College. And Dylan, that's where I met Dylan. So I was one of the MCs who kind of helped with the programming, and then Dylan was a huddle leader. He was a college athlete who led a huddle of 8 to 10 guys that really went deep with their faith. And that's where Dylan got a chance to serve. So if you're not familiar with 360, that's what 360 is. But the thing that I wanted to tap into, and this is something that resonates with me as well. So it was a period of my life. Again, I grew up in a Christian home. I never knew my dad. So, what was it like? You mentioned early on in when you were sharing your testimony that your dad is someone you've always looked up to. How important is it, do you think, for young men to have stable role models in the
Mm.
home? What benefit do you think that is?
I think. I mean, I think that's generally the
And I
number
know
one.
that's a loaded question.
Yeah, that's deep. But if I touch on it, I think genuinely like I forget. I've seen like the percentages. I'm sure you've seen the percentages of like the amount when your father is a Christian, the amount that the kid will be a Christian, like that percentage, and it's like
Yeah,
astronomically higher than if he wasn't,
yeah,
or if just your mother was. Like the father has such a huge impact on the household and you as a person. So I think it's so important. I think that's honestly one of the things I'm passionate about is discipleship. And that's why
mm,
I think everyone really truly needs to get plugged in with someone that's older than you that can pour into you. Because like you said, you never knew your father, you said, but like having someone,
right.
another role model that can disciple you and pour into you is just as important, I think. But specifically, like in your household, I think is so important, and that's why it's important to raise young men to be those father figures in those households.
Yeah, truthfully, that's actually what kind of really got me into FCA is growing up and knowing that I didn't have a dad, but I had coaches and the influence that the coaches had. And I played for some really good coaches, which was great. But I always felt like maybe there was an opportunity for them to go a little bit deeper. And obviously with FCA, you can't preach at your team and do all of that, but you can start to look at it like how you mentioned, where you're actually serving your team. And it's more
Yeah.
than just the winning and the losing, and it's being there and it's opening up doors and relationships that's beyond just the sport. And that was the part for me that really hooked me into FCA is I want to be the kind of coach that, like I had, but then a little bit more because yeah, that discipleship piece. But yeah, I like that. I love that, and it must have been cool to see that. One of the things though, I'm curious. So as you're looking up to your dad. He's kind of like your role model and the person you want to be like. How did it feel? Because, and I'm imagining here, so if I'm wrong, please correct me. But as you said, like around your COVID year, your freshman year, when COVID really hit, you kind of started feeling yourself kind of disconnecting, and you even used the word kind of hypocrite. So like, how did you find yourself navigating the relationship where you have your dad up here, you're viewing him, but you also probably aren't wanting him to find out maybe what you're kind of, you said, living for yourself. How did you
Mhm.
navigate the two of them, and what was your internal struggle? Was there an internal struggle as you were trying to keep both of those up?
Yeah, I don't think, and for anyone that looks up to anybody, I think the last thing you want to do is feel like you let them down. And
Mm,
I think at the time I was so scared, and not that obviously my dad wasn't going to do anything, and I know like looking now,
sure,
like especially with knowing Jesus and the Father, his love like for us when we mess up is something only like a type of love that a parent can have. And obviously God's love goes way beyond that we can't imagine. But thinking
sure,
back now, I know if I just went to my dad and said like, "Hey, I'm struggling," like I know he would have been there like for me and coached me through it. But I think at the time the last thing I wanted was for either of my parents to find out. Of like I
yeah,
want them to think of me as this perfect kid that never messed up and was doing everything right and fulfilling like the shoes of the next generation, and I wanted to be that
yeah,
kid. And so I think internally that made me struggle a lot more. I think I put so much pressure on myself, especially with that, and
yeah,
it honestly broke me because I was just living like a double life. I was just
yeah,
portraying this person to everyone else, and then I was living for myself off camera. But
yeah.
yeah,
Where do you think, and I think a lot of people struggle with this, and that's the beauty of this podcast, is I think a lot of your story I can connect to because that's something I went through. So my question is where do you think that pressure comes from? You grow up Christian and then you
mm,
find that time where you're like, is this really for me? Is this my family? Like, is this my faith or my parents' faith? What was that
yeah.
pressure? Where do you think that pressure came from that you were feeling at the time?
Mm. I think I just think it's honestly like a personal like I I don't think my parents put any pressure on me whatsoever either. But it's like I think
Usually
it's
they don't. It usually doesn't come from parents. Never.
yeah,
It's usually
it's
from something external.
yeah. I think I think it was honestly my fear of man at the time. Like just wanting to
Mm,
be I really wanted to be this person that was perfect. I wanted to be this person that was people looked at and was like, wow, this kid's awesome. This kid's great. And so I think I put all that pressure on myself from wanting everyone around me to think I was that guy that was cool. Like that I was that guy that was perfect. And so I put all that pressure on
Yeah.
myself to be that perfect person instead of embracing that I'm not. And the only perfect person is
Yeah.
Jesus that walked this earth.
Oh, that's so good.
I think that
Yeah,
was
man.
a big.
Well, yeah, no, it makes sense. I mean, especially as when you were younger, you mentioned that everyone kind of looked at you as like this goody two shoes. So like you probably felt like you had to keep that up. And
Mhm.
yet one of the things that one of the things that I wrestle with, right, is obviously, yes, we want to be like Jesus and we want to our life should look like his and we want to strive to follow in his footsteps. And I think the thing that I think we know in our head but we don't always accept it is we're going to fall short. And it's when we fall short, that's where grace comes in. That's where mercy and forgiveness come in. And I think a lot of times the last person we give that grace to is ourselves. And
Mm.
what we do is we end up feeling the guilt and the shame and the fear of failure. And we allow that to kind of intercede in that space that is probably where we know we messed up. But then that all floods in and starts attacking us. And
Yeah.
that's how it was for me. Like I'm very similar to that. I grew up in a Christian home, went to Christian school, went to Christian high school, went to Christian college. And sometimes it's almost like you're around it so much that you're almost afraid to be flawed, even though
Mm.
everyone's flawed. And everyone's trying to put on this mask. I like how you said it, like off camera versus on camera. And it's just, I think a lot of that has to do with there's this lack of authenticity because we're afraid to be real because we don't know how it's going to be addressed. I don't know. What
Yeah.
are your thoughts about that?
No, I genuinely think you articulated that perfectly because I think that was one of the most my biggest struggles was just
Hmm.
wanting to be like this person and like I don't know why I'm blanking. Can you just repeat what you said quick?
Yeah, why do you think it is so hard for Christians, or I don't even want to throw it at Christians. I think that's the human nature that everyone struggles with, is that why do people struggle with being vulnerable? Like what is it about looking like we have to be together all the time? I have my
Mm.
thoughts, but I'm curious to see what yours are. And I'll tell you what mine are when we're after you hear yours. But you go first though. Uh-oh,
I think
did I
it
lose you?
really I think it just comes down. Hello?
Oh no, there you are. Sorry about that.
No, you're good. Um, I think for me, it really just came down to ego. I think
Yeah.
I had this massive ego and that I thought for a long time I thought I was better than people and
Mm.
I think wanting to keep that persona and that ego up was why we try to keep this perfect look in life. And
Yeah.
I think especially if at a younger age I started embracing my flaws because the word talks about it, it says that Christ's power is made perfect in your weakness. And
Hmm.
I never understood that till I got older and started being like, I'm not this person. I'm not perfect, but I know that in my the things I struggle with, when I give it to you, like that's when your power truly shows. And yeah, I think that was really where I held to that a lot.
Yeah. I think similarly, all right, I think that's really the crux of it. And that's my thought too, like I was telling you. So I think, how I've lived my life, I should say, I don't want to make it for other people, but I know for me is I took pride in representing what I thought to be the right way. And then if people lived up to my what I thought were the standards, not what the Bible said, but what I thought, that's where it's like, all right, I'll let you in. So it almost became like I became the judge, the juror. I basically tried to make myself God unintentionally. It wasn't like I was sitting there saying, I'm God, you got to do it my way. But
Yeah.
that's basically what it came down to. So it was that ego thing. So I agree with you. I do think, one of my favorite verses is actually that verse in I think it's Second Corinthians 12, where it says, My power is made perfect in your weakness. And I think as a society, as a culture specifically here in the US, but also as guys, is we struggle with being able to admit when we're not strong. We struggle
Mm.
to own the weak part because for whatever reason, whether it's culture, whether it's society, whether it's just our human nature, we have to act like we have it all together, and we don't. And when that doesn't line up to how we think it should, that's where that disconnect happens. And then people try to fill in those gaps with whatever that disconnect could be. So I love the fact that you were sitting at a party and all of a sudden you allowed yourself in a moment of vulnerability to actually say, "Oh, I hear you, God." What was that experience like? I mean, I can just imagine it because I've been in similar situations where you're sitting there and you're like having that thought. You mentioned you know what you guys are all a bunch of hypocrites, and then all of a sudden God just slammed you in the head. Most people would have just been like, "Oh, forget it," and talked themselves out of it. But it
Yeah.
sounds like you allowed that to actually penetrate down into your soul. What was that experience like?
Well, for me, I think that experience was like the road to Damascus moment when the scales fell off
Hmm.
his eyes. It was like I was portraying this and I was looking through my life like almost I think what you said like you kind of made yourself like the judge, jury, and executioner. I thought that was great because I think that's how I lived my life for so long. And um yeah, it was like the scales fell off my eyes because it was more of yeah, I felt like I got struck down by God right there, but it was good. It was like I just in that moment like I loved being corrected. And that brings me
Yeah.
to the word again. It says like those like love correction, love to be corrected. And
Mhm.
that's something I always hated. And I honestly I'm still gotta work on it because eh, like that was that's something I always struggled with. And I'd
Sure.
always want to be right in every situation. Even when I was wrong, I'd make up a lie to be right. And that was always something I struggled with and got a lot better with it. But still, I think in that moment it was more like for some reason this Holy Spirit, I embraced the correction of it. And it was honestly
Yeah.
like I started seeing like the scales fell off and I started seeing the world in a new light. It wasn't like it was everything was sunshine and rainbows when when I got corrected, but it was like, wow, that makes sense now. Like that is making
Yeah.
sense. But
No, that's so good. And I think, and again, like it's not easy. I think a lot of guys, right? And this is a podcast that we do try to target more towards the guys. And but a lot of guys do struggle with that, right? Because in order to take correction, you have to own the fact that you're wrong.
yeah.
And you can't correct something unless you're willing to admit that, oh, my way isn't the best way. And um that part is almost like a skill. And I love how you said it, like you allowed you it's probably the Holy Spirit, right? Because every person thinks they're right, that's why they do what they do, and it's a matter of who's willing to take coaching, take correction, take that opportunity to get better at that. And I love that. I can remember in my life, my story, I love how you mentioned that, what's really been missing was that opportunity to serve. And, when I think of the word serve, really the other word that kind of couples that is that idea of humility. And you
Mm,
can't serve someone unless you think of yourself less. So we actually had a camp this week, and one of the words that we talked about was this idea of selfless. And I had a basketball coach in college that said, being selfless doesn't mean you think less of yourself. It just means thinking of yourself less. And I think in order to have that service attitude, you have to have that ability to say, hey, how can I serve you? It's not about me. It's getting outside myself and pouring into somebody else, whether it's at a camp, whether it's coaching, whatever it might be. So I think, and I would love to know your thoughts. Like if you were someone, maybe if you were able to talk to junior year Dylan and
mm,
he was having this conversation with you about, God's all of a sudden like hitting you in the head with that proverbial 2x4. What might you be able to do to serve him to kind of help him navigate maybe without the shame and the guilt? Because I think that typically goes along with that. When we feel convicted, we feel shame and guilt. And I don't think
mm.
those are things God wants us to feel. I think that's the enemy attacking us. So how could you
Yeah.
have helped younger you navigate that epiphany without maybe beating himself up for it?
Mm. It's a deep question. Um,
I know.
just real
Welcome
quick
to the
that
locker room.
that's what I was thinking of when I lost my train of thought before was that guilt and shame you talked about because
Yeah.
that was also something I think when you grow up as as in a Christian household, I think you hold yourself to a lot higher standard. And then so I think that
Yeah.
guilt hits even more. And you think you have to be this perfect guy. And that's something I always struggled with was just as people would mess up, yeah, grace for them. But when it was me, I beat myself up but way too much. And so I guess going off that, what I would tell myself, my junior year self was don't beat yourself up. Like this is why Christ came down. This is why he had to die for us. This is why he had to rise again. Because you're not perfect. You might you're a hypocrite. Okay. That's that's a sin. You messed up. You've been messing up. But hey, this is exactly why Jesus died for you. Like embrace that truth and embrace his grace. And then who are you, right? I would say who are you to think yourself that you can think you're better than God's grace, right? You're not worse than God's
Yeah.
grace. You think you are, bro. Let's go. Like, get up. I told myself to
Yeah.
get up and start serving.
Yeah. I love
That's
that. I love that. That's great advice. And I think there's a lot of guys probably listening to this who wrestle with that shame and guilt. And I think it's normal to feel that way, but I think God calls us to be not normal. I think we
mm,
as Christians allow ourselves to stay stuck in that shame and guilt and almost like we have to pay for it. And in a way,
mm,
we're basically putting ourselves back up on the cross because it's like that's what Jesus died for when he said, Father, why have you forsaken me? It's because all the guilt, all the shame, everything for all humanity was on Jesus. But yet when we allow ourselves to stay wallowing in that guilt, that shame, that fear, whatever it might be, it's almost like we're putting Jesus back up there or putting ourselves up there. And it's like
mm,
that's not what it's supposed to be like. It's supposed to be that freeing thing, but people don't know how to navigate it. So I love what you said about, showing yourself grace, giving yourself grace. Like this is what Jesus died for. And I think
mm.
almost we have to coach ourselves sometimes because it's easy to feel that way, when we mess up, when we're not perfect, that feeling. But I would love to I like going deep, by the way. So I'm sorry if these are like super deep questions. I like going deep. I love talking about real stuff because I think
That's what people
every guy struggles with this. Yeah. Yeah. But I guess the last question I'll have, and then we'll wrap it up and get you out of here is, um, if you were to look forward, right? Look forward to, when you have your family someday. Oh no, we lost them. So slight location change, but here we are back with Dylan. And the last question that I just wanted to ask you is, thinking about, everything we've talked about, thinking about, what it's like to struggle with the guilt and shame of, when you're not living up to what you think the Bible says, which is true, right? Like we do, there is a standard, and if we don't live up to that, you said it, that is sin. But
mm,
navigating through how that's what Jesus died for. Jesus died not just to save us, but to continue to remind us that there's grace and there's mercy, and that we're supposed to live our life in that way. So my last question for you, and then we'll get you out of here, is looking forward to someday down the road when you have a family, when you have um, kids, maybe even sons, if that's in your plan. I don't know what God has for you, but let's say that were be the case. And you are now the person that your child was looking up to. How would you then
mm,
use that to speak into your child so that they don't struggle with that shame, that guilt, that feeling of being a hypocrite?
mm. Um, I think I'd speak pretty similarly from when I had to go talk back to myself, my junior self.
Mhm.
I think, especially raising kids, like I take a lot of inspiration from my dad for how
Sure.
he did it. But I think um I really want to emphasize the grace, the grace, His grace, and
Yeah.
but I don't ever want to get lost on, like you said, we have this standard to live by. Like God made the
Right.
commandments so we could live by them, and so we could also see that
Right.
we could never fulfill them. Um,
Yes.
but I think knowing that those commandments are there so we can see how short we come from being perfect and just living in the grace that
Right.
that's why Jesus died for you and to keep getting
Right.
up. The righteous man. whatever it is. I think it's seven times 70. It falls and gets up 7 times 70 times or 7 times, something like that. But he keeps getting up. I
Yeah,
think that's
right.
that's really what I want to emphasize.
Yeah, I think that's the Romans 12, 1 and 2 is one of my favorite parts of scripture because it says, do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. And I
Mm,
think the standard is the standard, and the standard is the gospel. But then and it's like, let's allow that to continue to wash over us. God hasn't given us a spirit of fear, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. So
mm.
it's how we live life after we mess up because we know we're going to, right? We shouldn't try to, right? Our
Yeah,
goal should be to try to be like Jesus. But when we find ourselves struggling with that, not to get bogged down in that guilt and shame, but rather, like you said, to the grace and how there's grace there and how the continual turn of, 5 years from now, I'm more like Jesus, 10 years from now, I'm more like Jesus. And then the goal isn't to be perfect. The goal is to be like Jesus, who is perfect. But when
yeah,
we put that pressure on ourselves, I think that is, if the goal is perfection, but our eyes aren't on Jesus, that's when we get caught up in that performance. And I think that's where that can be dangerous. So,
yeah.
but
One of
anyway,
my, I'd just say one more thing is that
sure, yeah, go ahead.
yeah, Philippians 1:6 is one of like my comfort verses that kind of got me through. It says being confident in this very thing that he who it was like being confident in this very thing that he who began a good work in you will complete it until the day of Christ Jesus. And I think that was honestly one of the biggest verses and has been for my life and just knowing like, okay,
Yeah, man.
Christ is working. He began this good work. It's not complete, obviously, because I mess up, but he's still working on me.
Right.
He's still perfecting me until the day I'm with him one day, which will be such an amazing day.
Yeah.
But I think for all young men and young women is that's a very comforting verse, knowing like no matter how much you mess up, like he's still working on you. He's still with you. So
Right. Absolutely, brother. Well, listen, last thing, any other last thoughts or comments, or if you want people to follow you on socials or anything like that, whatever you got going on, now's the time to get that out there if you want to.
uh nah, I can't, I don't want to plug myself. I'm not plugging myself.
Oh, no, I know.
We're being humble on
Sure.
this one, Justin.
That's right. That's right. That's true. Well, I'll do a plug for 360. So
Yep.
I think this year it's already probably maxed out. But next year, if you're interested, if you're someone listening and you're in that ninth through 12th grade of high school, this camp's for you. And if you're in college, maybe be a huddle leader. Consider that. So, um, and you get the chance to hopefully hang out with Dylan. I'm sure he'll be there next year. Maybe
Yeah,
not.
I hope
But
if they let me, I'm gonna be out of college then. But
I'm sure they will. I know they
yeah,
want college age kids, but it'd be hard to say no to a vet like you, brother. But seriously, thank you so much for taking some time on a Saturday to record this, Dylan. And I look forward to seeing what God's going to do with a humble heart like yours and the willingness to serve. So thank you for taking some time and sharing your story, man.
yeah. Thanks for having me on, man. I love that you forced me out of my comfort zone. Answer some
Yeah,
tough questions.
yeah, man. Well, proud of you, brother. Appreciate you. And until next time, guys, every episode drops every other Tuesday. So until then.